It's Friday, baby. My hair's awful, so I'm wearing a hat. And it's time for Dot Booger's Pick of the Week. Yeah. Sorry, y'all. I'm still working on an intro for the show. I still haven't decided what that intro should be like. I think that one was a pretty strong candidate, though. Anyways, before I get started talking about some albums I listened to this week, let me give you all a little reminder that if you look in the description for the video, you'll see two links. One link will give you a Discogs list that has a full listing of all the albums I listened to this week. I don't always talk about all of the albums, as usually it's too much to talk about. Sometimes I just don't have nothing funny or interesting to say about it. But you'll see text reviews of each album and ratings. And then you'll also see a link to a YouTube playlist that has a playlist of choice tracks from this week's listening. So let's get on with it now. First up, we got the Pyramids play Penetration. So this is a surf album from the early 60s. I was really stoked to find a cheap used copy of it in a store at Domino Sound a few weeks ago. I'd never heard the whole album before. Really dig the title track. Penetration's kind of a surf guitar standard, and this is allegedly the original version of it, I think. Haven't really fact-checked that. Half of the songs on here are like vocal, surfy songs, and then the other half are instrumentals. I dig the instrumentals more. My favorite on here is a song called Paul. They kind of cut loose a bit more on that one, and it's not as formulaic and sort of painting inside the lines of surf guitar instrumentals as much. And they do a good version of Out of Limits. So dig this one. And then I took a chance on a couple of newer albums by a group I'd never heard before called Morricone Youth. So this is a group out of Brooklyn, New York that does cinematic music. They rescore movies. I think they've done a rescoring of Night of the Living Dead and Mad Max. This is The Lodger. And they're not Morricone. You got to have like a robust sense of testicular fortitude or cojones or whatever you want to say to put Morricone in your band name, because nerds like me are going to listen and they're automatically going to want to compare, this ain't as good as Morricone. And, I had to unravel that thinking a bit to enjoy it on its own merits, which I can enjoy it on its own merits. Is it as innovative and awesome as Morricone? No. It's not as spontaneous and sublime, but it is good, and they're definitely influenced by Morricone. You can hear it in their instrumentation and use of wordless vocals and twangy guitar and other sounds. But this one, The Lodger, is creepy now. Scare all Dot Booger. You just get scared looking at this old boy's giant head looking at you. And then you got the last Poe-Are-Know show. I don't reckon I've ever seen a Poe-Are-Know show. I don't really know much about them. So, I looked it up in the dictionary, and it seemed to have a lot to do with nudity. So, I didn't really have time to keep digging into it. I listened to the soundtrack, and for my best guess, Poe-Are-Know shows are very contemplative, like nude people thinking and writing letters, and stopping, and or nude people sitting on park benches and reading a book and then looking over their shoulder thinking somebody's watching them. And then maybe there's some other nude people lurking in the shadows. And, nothing else really happens, just a lot of tense moments. I think that's what Poe-Roo-Know shows is all about. Next up, we got Omar Khorshid with Giant plus Guitar. This is where it's at, Jack. He definitely has a surfy vibe in his tone, but he has a lot more technique, and he's playing sort of the Egyptian Lebanese music. You've got killer percussion in the background, and then you've got like organ and synthesizer. It's just a crazy winning combination. Like, highly recommend this for any guitar fans or fans of Eastern music or people that just like good music. Now, next up, we got the soundtrack to Space 1999. I love how optimistic they were back in the day in the late 70s and early 80s. Like in 1999, we're going to be all up in that space. We're going to be doing all sorts of things. It's the year 2024, brothers. And like, I don't even want to talk about it. But anyways, the thing about this soundtrack, like I've heard a lot of weird music and weird combinations of music. Like, you listen to the title theme of this, it's got some orchestral stuff that sounds real dramatic, and then it blasts into some disco funk. For a few bars, and then it stops and gets back into the dramatic orchestra. What the hell, man? I'm just like wondering, like, I don't reckon this will work on the dance floor. Now, next up, we got Morrissey, the Moz, with Viva Hate. And boy, oh boy, do people hate Morrissey. And boy, oh boy, do people love Morrissey. They love him, Jack. They jump on stage and hug and kiss that old boy and start crying and throwing flowers at him. And, you know, you don't find a lot of people that are in between with the Moz. I'm kind of an in-between guy with Morrissey and the Smiths. Like, I can see the good and bad in it. When I want to listen to this when I'm mowing the grass on a hot summer day, or even a cold day, or any day, if I'm mowing the lawn, no, I'm probably gonna want to listen to something rad like Crocus or Wrapped or Guns N' Roses or something like that. But you know, if I'm driving around by myself on a cold winter day, or just contemplating life, I listen to some old Viva Hate. It was a pretty solid album. I was introduced to it in 9th grade. It was the first Morrissey I ever heard. A buddy of mine turned me on to them and the Smiths and Morrissey. This was the first album that I heard by him. And, you know, I have a lot of memories listening to it. And I haven't listened to it much lately, so revisiting it was a trip. And this was made in 1988, or it's actually recorded in 1987 sometimes. And it's really fantastic if you consider that most pop music recorded around that time just sounded like absolute garbage. Next up, we got the soundtrack to the Sentinel. Man, back in the day, I'd go in the video store and see this movie or see a poster for it. I get real scared, Jack. They have all these old boys on the cover, like with the googly like eyes rolled back. I'd be like in the swimming pool when it's getting dark and think the Sentinel is going to come out and get me. I still think they're going to come and get me. I do need to watch this sometime. It's got old Burgess Meredith in it. He looked like he clowning real hard. Anyway, as far as the soundtrack goes, Gil Melle did the soundtrack, and recently listened to his soundtrack to the Andromeda Strain, which is a freaking crazy soundtrack. Weird, off-the-wall, avant-garde electronic music. This is reined in a lot more. It's a lot more conventional, and I enjoyed it. It's not like my favorite horror soundtrack, but I definitely listened to it again. This is on the Waxworks label too, and they've reissued tons of horror movie soundtracks. I've kind of stayed away from them because they're pricey, and to me, I get the vibe that they're more about style. You know, they redo the artwork, they have all kind of novelty colors for the vinyl, and I don't know, it just seemed a little bit gimmicky. So, but I gave them a chance. And I don't know, I kind of mixed feelings. The mastering job was really good, It's an excellent 45 RPM pressing, and it has a lot of dynamics and a good sound stage. It's a good pressing as far as that goes, but there's a lot of surface noise and a lot more crackles and pops than I would like to hear in something like this. So I don't know. Jury's still out on all Waxworks now. Let's hope the Sentinel's not going to get me. Next up, Orion Country. Have y'all heard of Orion? Well, let me tell you about him now. Back in the 70s, after Elvis died, whoever bought Sun Records decided it'd be a great idea and it'd be really tasteful if they just found this old boy that is a good Elvis impersonator, stuck a Zorro mask on him, and made people think this could be Elvis. We're not saying not saying this is Elvis Presley now. This is Orion. Okay, but it could be the real Elvis. Like his first album was called Reborn. Like the original artwork for the cover only existed for a little while. It was like Orion with his Zorro mask and his Elvis suit standing over a coffin that had Elvis in it. And somebody let him know that's probably not real tasteful to the king. So they changed the album cover. And then, they did a few more albums, including Country. And he's a great Elvis impersonator. And these country songs are better than most country that you would find in 1980. It's still mostly a conversation piece for me. Oh, and by the way, there's an awesome documentary about Orion that I think you can find it on Netflix, or you could once upon a time. Next up, we got the soundtrack to Dirty Game. And where has the title theme to this been all my life? Wow. Just a crazy sound. Like the organ almost sounds like a synthesizer sequencer thing. And it's just a great vibe. There's also a few other tunes on here that I like that are kind of jazzy, and that most of the things I like on here incorporate the organ in some way or other. This is going to be a keeper just for that title track, though. And finally, we got the pick of the week, King Crimson Islands. And I know what you're saying. Doc Booger, I hate progressive rock. Get that King Crimson out of here. And I'm kind of with you. Like, I'm not a huge prog rock fan myself. Like, a lot of it's too brainy and all about, like, how complex can we make this? Now, how many times can we change the time signature on you? I do have a big soft spot for King Crimson and some other prog rock, but I've spent hours and hours listening to their studio albums, live albums, since I was like 18 or so, or 19. And this is sort of in between some iconic eras of the band. And it's sort of a sleeper in their catalog. You won't, like, if you just don't know anything about them and you're reading some article about what's King Crimson all about, you'll see like some of their iconic albums mentioned, like Discipline or Lark's Tongues and Aspic, Red and the Court of the Crimson King, Thrack, some of these high marks in their catalog. This one's probably not going to be in there. And that's a shame, because to me, it's just satisfying from start to end, and it's a bit looser and feels very natural. And it's very satisfying as a studio album. Like some other studio albums, music's great and the production's not quite as good as like if you were hearing them do their live performances of some of the songs. But I love this one. It sounds like some very talented and very hardworking musicians got together, spent a little time deliberating over the direction of the album and just went for it. And just seems more natural and loose. And they even have Keith Tippett on piano, a jazz pianist on a few tunes. He's so good on the title track that I could just listen to him play with the vocals only, though there's lots more on that track. And it's a satisfying narrative and sequence of songs. Like, it feels like a journey. My personal, old Dog Booger's personal journey is like, I'm in old Dot Booger's in eastern seaside town, and he's collecting supplies, gets on a sailboat, starts sailing towards the island paradise. And he's not going too far before he sees some storm clouds, and then a big old grouper comes up to the surface and talks to old Dot Booger and says, "Hey, now you need to look out. There's a storm coming. You might want to turn back." I'm like, that's good. I'm fine now. Thank you. And I keep going, and then the storm comes, and the lightning crashes, and my boat crashes into a rock. And then I park in a port town and try to get to the store to get some supplies and fix my boat. And there's some murder that just took place, or some double suicide or something. The police are checking out, and I'm going to the store, getting some Twinkies and some boat supplies, and come back, and some scuzzy old girls from the tavern are trying to get up on my boat and mess with my crew. And I gotta tell them, "Go on now, hit the road, Jack." I get back on my boat, make it to the paradise, and sit on top of an island mountain and look down and just cry about it. That don't sound weird or pretentious at all, does it? As far as the music goes, I'm not going to play any clips from it. I have a lot of fear and respect for Robert Fripp, and they real good at getting stuff taken down, it seems like. So I'm a bit timid about putting music. They also don't like flash photography at their shows. But guess what, brothers? We're going to try this. How about that, Robert Fripp? Some flash photography of some King Crimson. But, I'll play you a part from my favorite song on the album. It's called A Sailor's Tale. Part goes like this. And that's it, brothers. It's that part where the bass goes, and the drums are doing a good groove. And Robert Fripp's not doing anything, brothers, because it takes a good musician to know when to play. It takes a great one to know when not to play. How about that? You should be paying me for that master class. Anyway, that tune, Sailor's Tale, it has probably my favorite Robert Fripp guitar solo, or at least one of my favorites. It's just crazy, man. Like, he's doing some crazy banjo plectrum style chord stuff all up and down the neck. It sounds like it sounds like they were like, "All right, Robert, Bob, we're going to do your guitar solo. Just wait a minute, brothers." And then he waited for like 13 hours, and they were finally like, "All right, now come play." And it's 3:30 in the morning. He's like, "I'm tired, brothers. Here's your guitar solo right here." And that's probably not how it happened, but it just sounds crazy. And I've liked that solo for so long, it just kind of became normal to me, until one day, buddy of mine at work that's a guitarist, he's really into jazz, and we were talking about guitarists, and I was like, "Oh man, Robert Fripp's Sailor's Tale. Have you heard that solo?" "No." "Here, let's listen." My buddy's sipping his coffee, and it starts going. It goes about 30 seconds. He's like, and it goes another 15 seconds. He's like, "Well, that's real interesting. Now got a lot to do. I think I need to get on back to work. I'll see you later." And I felt like old Marty McFly, like, "Oh, I guess you kids aren't ready for this one." Anyways, that's all I got for you this week. go on and listen to music and talk about it and listen to yourself talk about it. Say hi to your mom and them, give them a hug, get out there and enjoy the Mardi Gras season. And I'll see you next time. Write it on a piece of paper. It looked like this. Like if I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can kind of see that as the patterns repeat, different numbers occur on top of each other. And man, that's just even more confusing. You're not going to understand no polymeter. You ain't never going to get it if you don't know it by now.